I didn't scream. I didn't beg for explanations or send a single message demanding answers. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop labeled "Just in Case" and started uploading everything. Zoe's video, her GPS logs, the note she hid in her sock. Every text, every timestamp, every silent detail they thought no one would notice. I didn't tell them what I was doing. I wanted the truth to reach the right people before they could spin another lie, and once the truth started moving, there was no stopping it. What happened next? Well, they never saw it coming. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. I was folding laundry when the notification pinged on my phone. Just a small sound, a tiny vibration. I almost ignored it. Probably some app telling me Zoe hit her daily step goal or drank enough water, I thought. But something, call it instinct, or maybe that little voice that only shows up when you're a mom, told me to check it anyway. It wasn't a fitness update. It was a low battery alert from Zoe's emergency smartwatch. Zoe never lets her battery drop below 70%. She's the kind of 17-year-old who triple-checks her charger before leaving the house, the kind who plugs in her phone during lunch just in case. So seeing a dying signal from her GPS tracker, that was my first red flag. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. And again. Nothing. My hands were already starting to sweat. I told myself maybe she just didn't have service. Maybe they were in a canyon or out of range. But the ache in my chest told me different. Something was wrong. Zoe was on a weekend trip with my family. My mother, Harper, my younger sister, Penelope, and Penelope's 2 kids, Mason and Chloe. They had invited Zoe along for a bonding hike in Arizona. I'd been skeptical, but they insisted it was just a simple family getaway. Let us get to know her better, Mom had said. She's family, Penelope had echoed. Zoe had hesitated too. She didn't have the best relationship with my side of the family. But when Penelope sent her a text saying, "Let's start fresh," and my mom followed up with a phone call about reconnecting, Zoe had looked at me and said, "What if they actually mean it this time?" I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe my family could change. Now I couldn't reach my daughter. And the one device meant to keep her safe was dying. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring almost too quickly. "Oh, she just wandered off a little," Harper said casually, like she was talking about a dog slipping through the backyard gate. She got upset about something and said she needed some space. In the desert, at noon, with temperatures pushing 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Penelope's voice came through the speaker next, equally unfazed. "She's just being dramatic, Emily. You know how she is. I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I didn't even ask another question. I just hung up, because I knew if I kept listening I'd say something I couldn't take back. And I didn't have the luxury of wasting time. My daughter was somewhere out there alone. I had to move." I opened my laptop and booked the first flight to Flagstaff. The soonest I could leave was in 4 hours. It felt like an eternity. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I scrolled down my contacts and found a name I hadn't called since the summer before my divorce. Julian. Julian and I had met years ago on a backcountry hiking trip I took when I was trying to recenter myself as a single mom teetering on burnout. He was the wilderness survival instructor, gritty patient, the kind of man who could build a fire out of wet moss and a chewing gum wrapper. I was the over-prepared mom with a solar charger, backup batteries, and a laminated list of emergency numbers. We hadn't spoken in forever, but now there was no one else I trusted more to help me find Zoe. I hit call. He picked up after 2 rings. "I need you," I said. He didn't ask why. He just asked. Where the next few hours were a blur. I threw things into a backpack. Water bottle, first aid kit, extra chargers, protein bars, then changed it all out again because nothing felt right. I tried to breathe, but the air in my lungs kept turning into panic. My flight boarded as the sun was setting. I remember pressing my forehead against the window, watching the clouds roll past like waves. Somewhere down there, Zoe was waiting. Or worse, She wasn't. I kept replaying the last time I saw her. She was zipping up her duffel bag, annoyed by my overbearing reminders to hydrate and wear sunscreen. Mom. She had groaned. I'm not going to the moon. I had hugged her twice. Told her I loved her 3 times. Like a fool, I thought those words could keep her safe. When I landed in Arizona, Julian was already there. He stood near the rental jeep, arms crossed, looking exactly how I remembered. Calm, capable, and ready to do whatever it took. He didn't say much, just handed me a bottle of cold water and said, "Let's go find your kid." I nodded because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Before we drove off, I opened the GPS app again. Zoe's last known location hadn't changed. The dot sat still in a part of the map with no roads, no towns, just red rock, and the kind of silence that only ever means danger. The sun was rising again. Time was running out. And all I could think about was how my family, my own mother, my sister, had told me not to worry. That Zoe just needed space. No, my daughter didn't need space. She needed saving. Julian didn't waste a second once I landed. He had already picked up the rental jeep and filled it with everything we'd need: extra water, a med kit, printed maps, a pair of hiking poles, and 2 hats with neck flaps. Arizona wasn't playing around today. The air was already rippling from the heat, and the sky was a white-blue blaze without a cloud in sight. It wasn't even noon yet. I barely remember the ride to the trailhead. I kept checking Zoe's last known location every few minutes on my phone, even though I knew the signal had stopped moving hours ago. The dot sat in the middle of a dusty expanse with no roads, no visible landmarks, nothing but rocks and desert scrub. My stomach felt hollow, like it was waiting for a worst-case scenario it couldn't yet name. Julian pulled the jeep to a stop just off the side of a dirt road near the mouth of a hiking trail that looked more like a suggestion than a path. No other cars, no other people. Just the 2 of us, and a broken silence between cicadas and wind. "We're about 2 miles out," he said, checking the GPS against the printed topo map. "If the signal was accurate, we'll have to veer off trail in the second leg." I nodded. My mouth was too dry to speak, and I hadn't even taken a step yet. He handed me a cold water bottle and checked his pack. "You ready?" "No? Not even close." But I clipped the GPS tracker to my vest and nodded again. We started walking. The heat was like something alive. It pressed against my skin, wrapped around my lungs, made my eyes sting. Within 10 minutes, my boots were full of sand, my shirt stuck to my back, and sweat was dripping off my temples like slow rain. Julian moved at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow, just enough to make progress without burning through our strength. We passed a dried-up riverbed, some scattered rocks, a twisted juniper bush clinging to life. Then I saw it. A flash of red just ahead. "Wait," I whispered, moving closer. There, tied to a jagged piece of sandstone, was a scarf. Zoe's scarf. The one I watched her loop around her neck just 2 days ago before she left. It was knotted carefully, not like something blown by the wind. A marker. Julian picked it up gently, turning it over in his hand. "She's trying to be found," he said. The words hit me square in the chest. She knew something was wrong. And she left signs anyway. My knees wobbled, but I forced myself upright. We kept moving. The trail thinned out until it wasn't a trail anymore. Just scorched ground, splintered rock, and an occasional patch of stubborn grass. Every 30 seconds I wiped sweat from my brow. Then I stopped bothering. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we were still moving. We climbed a low ridge, then curved down into a shallow valley where the air felt thicker, more oppressive. My thoughts started turning against me. What if we were too late? What if we were reading the signal wrong? What if that scarf was the last sign she could leave? "Emily," Julian said, gently pointing ahead. A water bottle, lying sideways in the dust, half buried in sand. I rushed over and picked it up. The plastic was hot, but not scorching. "Still warm," Julian said. "She was here not too long ago." Hope flared in my chest, but it was fragile. I pocketed the bottle and pushed forward. We reached the base of a rock formation that looked like it had been dropped from the sky. Sloped, jagged, rising at a harsh angle. Julian checked the GPS again. She should be just over that ledge. Without waiting, I started climbing. The rocks scraped my palms. My boots slipped twice. I didn't care. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I kept going. Because if I hesitated, I knew I'd break. And I didn't have that luxury. When I pulled myself over the final ledge, I saw something move. A flicker of motion in the shadow beneath an outcrop. I didn't wait. I scrambled across the flat knees, scraping against stone, and then, there she was, Zoe. Curled on her side, skin-flushed lips cracked, her hat still on, eyes half open, blinking against the light. My knees buckled as I dropped beside her. "Zoe," I whispered, brushing sand from her cheek. "Baby, I'm here. I'm here." Her body was hot, feverish. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. I leaned in closer. "What? What is it?" "They took my bag," she rasped. "On purpose." My throat closed. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even cry. I just held her tighter, one hand already reaching for my water bottle, the other trembling as I cradled her head. Behind me, Julian radioed the ranger station to report a medical emergency. We had her. She was alive. But just barely. As I looked down at my daughter, my brilliant, sarcastic, tough-as-nails daughter, I realized something terrible. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't some misunderstanding. Someone had left her here to die, and they thought I'd never find her. The hospital lights were too bright. The kind that make everything feel sterile and distant, like you're walking through a place where nothing is allowed to feel real. I carried Zoe into the ER, half of her weight on my shoulder, the other half held up by sheer willpower and adrenaline. She was conscious, barely, her lips dry and splitting, her skin flushed in an unhealthy red. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut like a blade. "They took my bag," she said. "On purpose." She didn't say who. She didn't have to. I already knew. The nurse took her from my arms and rushed her into a room. IV fluids, ice packs, electrolyte drips, words I could barely follow floated in and out of the hallway. Heat exhaustion, moderate dehydration, stable but close. The kind of phrases that mean you made it, this time, but that you're never going to forget how close you came. I sat in the corner, still in my hiking boots, hands raw from the rock ledge, watching through the glass like a ghost. I couldn't cry. Not yet. Because crying felt like surrender, and I wasn't done fighting. While they worked on Zoe, my mind slipped backward. Not to the hike, not to the rescue, but to everything that came before it. To the cracks that had always been there, even when I tried to pretend they weren't. My family doesn't fight loud. They wound with quiet smiles and subtle exclusions. The kind of people who call you too sensitive when you notice the way they left your name off the group text. My younger sister Penelope has always been the shiny one. The golden child. She could show up late, forget your birthday, fail a class, and still get praised for just being herself. I got straight A's, held down 2 jobs in college, and was told not to brag. It wasn't abuse, not the kind you can point to. It was 1,000 little cuts, expected to be the helper, the peacemaker. The one who understood why everyone else was allowed to act out, but never me. Then I had Zoe. Zoe didn't come into the world quietly. She asked questions at 2, challenged authority at 4, and gave honest answers whether you wanted them or not. She was sharp, observant, not easily impressed, and never afraid to make people uncomfortable. She reminded me of myself, only stronger, fiercer. My family didn't know what to do with her. They tried, I'll give them that. They bought her glitter pens and bubblegum pink sweaters. Zoe wore black hoodies and combat boots. She memorized state laws about child safety and asked waiters where their food was sourced from. She was a walking reminder that they couldn't mold every woman in the family into a smiley, agreeable version of themselves. Except for Grandma Evelyn. From the second time they met, Evelyn saw something in Zoe that no one else in the family ever bothered to look for. She listens, Evelyn had said over tea one afternoon with her signature sharpness. Finally, someone in this family who doesn't just wait for their turn to talk. They became close. Closer than Zoe was with anyone else in our bloodline. I watched it happen, and for once, I didn't interfere. Zoe didn't let people in easily. But with Evelyn, she did. I saw them share books, debates, walks in the garden. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was real. Then last month, Evelyn called me over. Just me. She had tea and shortbread cookies waiting and a manila folder on the table. My will, she said, tapping it like it was nothing more than a grocery list. Half of everything I leave behind will go to Zoe. The rest will go to Penelope's kids. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there, teacup in hand, too stunned to move. I know what I'm doing, she added. Don't argue. I didn't. Because deep down, I agreed with her. Zoe deserved it. Not because she was perfect, but because she had never once tried to be something she wasn't for anyone else's benefit. She earned Evelyn's trust not through charm, but through character. But I knew what this decision would do, what it would ignite. 4 days later, Penelope found out. Don't ask me how. My family leaks secrets like sieves. She called me the moment she found out already, mid-scream. Are you kidding me, she shouted. 3 kids against 1, and you're okay with this. I didn't write the will, I said, trying to stay calm. Evelyn did. But you didn't stop her. Penelope barked, then hung up. An hour later, my mom, Harper, called. You know Penelope's under a lot of stress right now, she said, her voice sugar-coated but sharp underneath. Her job, her kids, her marriage, it's all weighing on her. I'm not in charge of her marriage, I replied flatly. She's just worried that Zoe is manipulating Evelyn. Harper said carefully, like she was testing a theory. That word, manipulating, was what did it. My blood boiled. Zoe, who scans every room for unspoken tension. Zoe, who says I'm fine just to keep the peace even when she's not. Zoe, who's never once tried to make herself smaller but has paid the price for it every time. Manipulative. That was rich. Things got colder after that. Not loud. Just quieter. Zoe got left off group chats. When one of Penelope's kids had a birthday photos went up all over social media. But Zoe wasn't in a single one, even though she'd been there. She came home that day, dropped her bag in the hallway and asked me quietly, "Do you think they hate me?" I lied. No. And then just like that came the invitation. "Let's take the kids to Arizona," Harper said over the phone, her voice overly cheerful. "A little bonding trip, no pressure, just Claire, the cousins, us, and Zoe." Why now, I asked, already suspicious. Because she's family. We should all try. My mother replied. Then Penelope sent Zoe a follow-up text. "Let's start fresh. For real this time." Zoe stared at it for a long time. Then she looked up at me and said, "What if this time is different?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her not to trust them. But I also saw that tiny glimmer of hope in her eyes, the part of her that still wanted to believe family could change. So I helped her pack. Triple-checked her charger, reminded her to hydrate. Again and again, she rolled her eyes and said, "You act like I'm hiking through Death Valley alone." I didn't laugh. I just hugged her twice and told her I loved her 3 times. And now here we were. In a hospital room in Arizona, her body hooked to IVs, her voice barely a breath. "They took my bag," she whispered again, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "They didn't mean to come back." My breath caught. Because I knew in my bones she was right. They never planned to bring her home. The week before the trip, I got a phone call from my mother. It was one of those strangely timed conversations where everything feels rehearsed, like she had already practiced what she was going to say. "We've been talking," Harper said, meaning her and Penelope, never me. "And we think it's time to reconnect. With Zoe, with you." It's been too long. I didn't respond right away. I could feel the familiar static rising in my chest, the kind I'd trained myself to ignore when it came to my family. They weren't people who apologized. They just moved on, expected you to fall back in line. She went on painting a picture that sounded on the surface almost sweet. A weekend trip to Arizona. Just the kids, Penelope, Harper, and Zoe. Just the girls, she said. No pressure, no drama. Think of it as a fresh start. I wanted to laugh. Or hang up. Or both. Then Penelope texted Zoe directly. Let's start fresh. I saw the message light up on Zoe's phone while she was doing homework. She stared at it for a while, not saying anything, just held the phone thumb hovering over the screen like she wasn't sure if she should delete the message or respond. What do you think she finally asked? I shrugged. Do you want to go? I don't know, she said quietly. What if this time is different? She didn't say it with hope. She said it like someone who's been burned before but is still willing to stick their hand near the flame just to see. I should have said no. I should have told her that families like ours don't change. That Penelope doesn't offer peace unless she's hiding something sharp behind her back. But Zoe wanted to believe it, and I wanted her to feel like she could trust her instincts even if mine were screaming. So I helped her pack. We went over everything. Charger, backup, charger, sunscreen, granola bars, hydration tabs. I told her to keep her GPS watch on and charged at all times. She rolled her eyes, of course, and said, You act like I'm going on a mission. You are, I said. Your mission is to come home safe. She laughed then, just a little, and promised she would. I hugged her twice, told her I loved her 3 times. She left the next morning. I didn't sleep much that weekend. Kept checking my phone for updates, half expecting a message from Zoe saying, It's weird, but okay, or they're being normal, surprisingly. But all I got was silence. Not worrying at first, just disappointing. Then it turned into something darker. I didn't know the full story until later when she was well enough to tell it. It happened on the 3rd day. They'd been hiking near a dry ridge somewhere west of Flagstaff. The sun was high, the air thick with heat, and everyone had slowed down. Zoe had been walking in the back, taking pictures of rock formations. Her backpack was weighing heavy on her shoulders. Hydration, bladder, extra snacks, charger, map, everything she might need in case of emergency. That's when Penelope turned to her and said, Go take some photos by the rocks up ahead. We'll wait here. Zoe hesitated. Something about the way she said it felt off. But she chalked it up to heat or nerves. She didn't want to be paranoid, so she adjusted her hat, tucked her camera strap tighter over her shoulder, and walked ahead. She snapped a few pictures. A cactus blooming despite the dry, a hawk circling overhead, a twisted piece of driftwood bleached white by the sun. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When she turned around, the ridge behind her was empty. At first, she assumed they'd driven around to the other side to surprise her, or maybe reach a shadier spot. But then she realized something else. Her bag was missing. Not her camera bag, the small one slung across her chest, but her main pack, the one she'd taken off just before walking forward, the one with her emergency GPS beacon, her map, her backup phone, second water bottle, everything gone. She stood there for an hour, then 2. The wind picked up. The sun blazed harder. Her lips cracked. Her heart started racing. Not from exertion, but from understanding. They weren't coming back. She found a smooth rock and sat down, pulled her sock halfway off and slid a folded note inside just in case someone found her and she couldn't speak. My name is Zoe. My family left me. My mom's number is in my camera bag. Please call her. She said she kept whispering that in her head over and over like a prayer. They left me. They left me. She didn't cry. She told me that later. She was too angry to cry. I think they took the bag on purpose, she told me from her hospital bed, voice steady, eyes locked on mine. And I believed her, because Zoe wasn't the type to assume the worst. She gave people chances, even when they didn't deserve them. She believed in logic, in patterns, in cause and effect. So if she said they did it on purpose, then they did. They didn't forget the bag. They didn't get turned around. They didn't panic and come back later only to miss her. No, they made her walk ahead. They took her bag, and they drove away. It wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just bad parenting. It was a decision, one they made together, because if Zoe didn't come back, the will would change. And that was the part I couldn't unhear. They had taken a bright, smart, stubborn 17-year-old girl into the desert and left her behind, because they thought she was in the way, because they believed they could make it look like an accident. They underestimated her. They underestimated me, and they forgot who raised her. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone to demand answers or shout into the phone. That would have been too easy for them. Too predictable. My family knows how to twist raised voices into melodrama, how to weaponize anger and wear victimhood like perfume. No, I didn't give them that. I gave them silence. And then I got to work. Zoe was still in the hospital, her body recovering faster than her trust. She slept more than she spoke, though. When she did talk, her words were deliberate, focused, clear, like someone who'd spent hours rehearsing what had to be remembered, what had to be told. The second night after the nurses dimmed the lights and the machine settled into a rhythmic hum, I opened her camera bag. She always carried it crossbody, even when hiking. And sure enough, tucked inside a padded sleeve next to her lens cap was her vlogging camera, fully intact. Battery drained but recoverable. I charged it in the hospital room using the outlet beneath the tiny TV and waited. When the light turned green, I opened the files. There it was. Rough, shaky footage. Dust on the lens. But the audio was clear. Penelope's voice. "Go get some good shots. We'll wait here." Zoe's voice. "Okay, I'll be quick." Then 10 minutes of nothing but wind and occasional footsteps crunching gravel. Then silence. And finally, Zoe's whisper. Where did they go? I paused the video and sat still for a full minute. This wasn't a theory anymore. It wasn't speculation or paranoia or the heat playing tricks. This was evidence. I pulled up the GPS logs from her smartwatch next. Zoe had enabled data syncing before she left, just like I'd taught her. I traced the map on my laptop screen, a clean line of movement curving toward the ridge, then stalling, circling, pausing. The dot didn't move for over 2 hours until my own icon entered from the east, climbing steadily toward hers. The story was there, in timestamps and coordinates, in the slow, terrible realization that she'd been left behind on purpose. Next, I scanned the handwritten note she'd tucked into her sock. The ink was smudged but still legible. "My name is Zoe. My family left me. My mom's number is in my camera bag. Please call her." I took a photo of it, then another from a different angle. I included the sock it came from, the timestamp, the GPS coordinates of where we found her. I opened a new email draft and typed a name I hadn't written in years, Benson. Benson was Evelyn's attorney, a quiet man with soft gray suits and old-school manners. He once mailed me a handwritten apology for spilling red wine on my coat at a New Year's Eve gathering. He was precise, discreet, and fiercely loyal to Evelyn. I typed the subject line carefully. Urgent, regarding the Arizona incident. In the body of the email, I didn't include commentary, just bullet points and facts, attached the video clip, the GPS data, the hospital intake form, a photo of the note, a PDF copy of Penelope's text message to Zoe. "Let's start fresh, Wasan." I included a scan of the family group itinerary Harper had sent, the one stating Zoe would be with them from Friday to Monday. Then I hit send. Benson replied within the hour, "Received. Meeting with Evelyn tomorrow morning." That was enough for now. My next call was to law enforcement. I didn't dial 911. This wasn't a frantic emergency. This was premeditation. This was strategy. I looked up the local sheriff's department closest to the hiking trail and called their non-emergency line. "Detective Moreno," the woman said, transferring me. When he answered, his voice was calm, steady. I introduced myself, explained everything in short, clipped sentences. The hiking trip, the disappearance, the recovery. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. "Did they report her missing?" he asked. No? Did they leave the area after she went missing? Yes. Did they return to look for her? No. Do you have reason to believe they knew she was left behind? I do. And I can prove it. There was a pause. Then, "Can you come in? I'm out of state," I said. "But I can upload everything, and I'm willing to file a sworn affidavit." Another pause. Then he said, "Don't send anything by regular email. I'll create a secure link." He took my information, promised to follow up, said he'd review the evidence and assign an investigator within 24 hours. I thanked him, hung up, and sat quietly for a few minutes, the hum of the hospital machines soft around me. When I went back into Zoe's room, she was awake. Her eyes were tired but focused. She looked at me and asked, "Are they coming?" I sat down beside her. "Not unless it's in handcuffs," I said. Her mouth twitched into the smallest smile. The next day, Zoe's voice returned with full clarity. So did her sarcasm. She asked the nurse if the IV fluids counted toward her hydration goals. Later, she asked if I thought hospitals gave loyalty points. But then she said something I hadn't let myself think. "I don't think they ever meant to bring me back." I didn't correct her. Because she was right. She told me the full story in pieces. How they'd stopped for gas before the hike and Penelope had taken her emergency bag out of the car by mistake. How she was told to keep her main phone off so it could charge faster. How her cousins were told that Zoe was meeting a friend later and would be picked up separately. It was scripted, calculated. I asked her if she wanted to report it herself. "No," she said. "I want you to—" "Good," I replied, because I already did. That afternoon a second email came in. Benson again. Arizona incident. Spoke with Evelyn. She's seen everything. You'll want to stay available over the next 2 weeks. This won't stay quiet for long. And right behind that, Detective Moreno. We're preparing a formal report and request for charges. Reckless endangerment of a minor. Child neglect. Failure to report a missing person. We will be contacting the individuals directly. I didn't call my family. I didn't send a warning. I didn't give them the chance to spin it. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. And mine had just gone loud. The driveway of Evelyn's estate looked the same as always. Manicured hedges, gravel path, smooth like someone had just raked it, the smell of fresh lavender drifting from the front garden. But something was different this time. Something heavier. Zoe sat beside me in the car, quiet eyes fixed forward. She wore black. Not out of rebellion or symbolism, but because it was the only thing that made her feel like herself again. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. Just raw clarity. "You ready?" I asked, knowing it was a weighted question. She nodded once. "Let's do it." We stepped out together and walked up the front steps, our footsteps landing too softly in a space that already felt carved with tension. Inside the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and restraint. Everyone was already there. My mother Harper sat at the far end of the table adjusting the napkin in her lap like it was the most important task in the world. My father Thomas was buttering a biscuit with unnecessary focus. Penelope leaned back in her chair too, composed, too still the way people do when they know something is coming. But hope pretending hard enough will change the outcome. Mason and Chloe. Penelope's kids whispered quietly to each other. They looked uncomfortable but not confused. Maybe they didn't know everything. Maybe they knew enough. Zoe and I didn't smile. We didn't offer hugs or greetings. We walked to our seats at the opposite end of the table and sat down like guests at a funeral. Everyone knew why we were there. They just didn't know when it would start. The silverware clinked softly as people picked at food they weren't really eating. Evelyn was nowhere in sight yet. That more than anything added weight to the room. Her absence was not an accident. It was orchestration. Penelope finally broke the silence. "Can we talk after this?" she said across the table, voice tight. I didn't blink. Absolutely not. Zoe didn't even turn her head. Before anything else could be said, a sound cut through the room, the firm, unmistakable tap of Evelyn's cane against the hardwood floor. She entered slowly with purpose, her posture tall despite the years on her bones. She wore navy blue, her favorite shade when she wanted to be taken seriously. In her other hand, she held a folder. Slim, tidy, lethal. She walked to the fireplace, didn't sit, didn't look around for a nod of approval. She simply turned to face us all. "Thank you all for coming," she said. The room froze. Even Mason stopped chewing. Evelyn's voice was calm but carried like glass over marble. "I have an announcement regarding my estate." Penelope visibly flinched. Harper sat up straighter. Thomas glanced at me, then looked away. Evelyn's eyes scanned the table slowly, like she was assigning weight to each soul present. When she got to Zoe, she stopped. "Some of you have disappointed me profoundly." The words hung there, unmoving. "You tried to hurt what I love. She continued to protect what you believed you were owed. You will not succeed." Penelope opened her mouth, panic flickering in her carefully drawn eyes. My mother reached over, touching her wrist. A silent warning. But it was too late. Evelyn lifted the folder in her hand and said, "Effective immediately, the entirety of my estate will be inherited by one person." Silence. Not a gasp, not a whisper, just stunned, suspended breath. Then my father, barely above a whisper, "Allison." That's insane!" My mother looked like she had swallowed a pin. Penelope erupted. "She's manipulating you." She snapped, her voice suddenly shrill. "She's 17. She's unstable. She ran off on that trail by herself. She wanted attention." "She nearly died," I said coldly without looking at her. "Oh, please," Penelope hissed. "You probably told her to stage it. You've always had this martyr act, Emily. You'd do anything to make me look bad. You left her," I said, "still even. You left her in the desert. She didn't have to go." Penelope's voice cracked. I didn't think she'd say yes, and just like that, the room shifted. Evelyn raised one brow. "So you admit you lied to her?" Penelope's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. No sound came out. My mother looked away. My father took a long sip of water like he wished it would drown him. Evelyn stepped forward. "I have reviewed the evidence. I have consulted my attorney. And I have pressed charges." Penelope's eyes widened. "What?" "The sheriff will be contacting you this week," Evelyn said without blinking. "Possibly tomorrow." "You can't do that." Harper burst out, her voice cracking through her usual composure. "She's your granddaughter." Evelyn turned to her, and for the first time in my life, I saw disgust on her face. "And Zoe is my great-granddaughter," she said. "She has more of me in her than either of you ever did." The room might as well have caught fire. No one moved. Then Penelope stood, her face contorted in betrayal. "You always hated me," she shouted. "You always wanted Emily to win. You're just using Zoe as a pawn." Evelyn didn't respond. Penelope turned to me. "You put her up to this." I smiled for the first time that day. "No," I said. "You did. I just made sure people saw it." She stormed out of the room. My mother followed silent. My father stayed seated, hands trembling. And Evelyn sat down finally, like her work was done. Zoe reached for a glass of water, her hand steady. For the first time, I noticed she didn't look afraid anymore. She looked like someone who'd survived fire, and watched the match that lit it finally burn out. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. There were no soaring ceilings or long oak benches like in the movies. Just pale gray walls, a modest judge's bench, and rows of padded chairs that creaked when you sat down. But even in its simplicity, the room held weight. The kind of weight that says today someone will answer for what they did. It had taken months to get here. Months of meetings with attorneys, gathering reports, printing records, submitting affidavits. Julian had come forward with his own statement, documenting our rescue of Zoe. Evelyn's attorney Benson had filed supporting documentation tying Zoe's near-death experience to the pending inheritance dispute. Detective Moreno built the case brick by brick, careful and methodical. We weren't just accusing them of cruelty anymore. This was about law. This was about justice. Zoe sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, her posture upright, her expression unreadable. She wore dark slacks, a soft blue blouse, and her hair pulled back into a low, clean ponytail. No accessories, no distractions, just presence, steady, composed, resilient. I wanted to reach out and squeeze her hand, but I didn't. She didn't need comforting. She needed to be seen. The courtroom filled slowly. My mother and father sat behind their defense attorney, stone-faced. Penelope flanked them on the other side, trying and failing to appear calm. Her jaw was tight. Her arms crossed, eyes darting between the judge and the audience like she expected someone to burst in and declare it all a mistake. No one did. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with short cropped hair and a voice like a gavel itself, entered and called the proceedings to order. She read the charges one by one, clear and without hesitation. Reckless endangerment of a minor, neglect, failure to report a missing person, attempted interference with a legal trust, and attempted manslaughter. The words landed one after another, like stones dropped into still water. Penelope shifted in her seat. My mother blinked, then looked down. My father stayed frozen. Then came the witnesses. Zoe was called first. She stood up slowly, walked to the front, and took the oath with a voice that didn't waver. State your name for the court. Zoe Blake. Your age. 17. The prosecutor began gently. She asked Zoe to recount the trip, the day of the hike, the instructions she received, the last thing she saw before she turned back and realized she'd been left behind. Zoe didn't cry. She didn't falter. She spoke with a measured cadence that made the entire courtroom lean in. When they told me to walk ahead, she said I thought they were just letting me take photos. I didn't realize they'd taken my main backpack out of the car. I didn't realize they were going to leave. And when did you realize that? When I turned around 10 minutes later, the car was gone. So was my bag. They didn't forget. They took it. A murmur moved through the courtroom. The prosecutor leaned forward. What did you believe their intent was? Zoe. Zoe looked straight ahead, voice calm as ice. I don't think they meant to come back. I don't think they cared if I made it out. I think they were hoping I wouldn't. Penelope's face turned red. I could hear Harper's soft gasp behind me. The judge didn't move, didn't speak, just let the silence settle. Then they called me. I walked to the front and placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down and looked at each juror like I had something to offer, not just for Zoe, but for every parent in the world who's been told to stay silent. They asked me for evidence. I presented the smartwatch GPS logs, Zoe's hospital intake form, the time-stamped video clip from her camera, the note she'd written and hidden in her sock, the screenshots of the family group text, the travel itinerary. Penelope's text message. I kept my answers short. No emotion, just truth. Because truth didn't need dressing. It stood just fine on its own. The defense tried to twist it, of course. They asked Zoe if she'd ever been dramatic, if maybe she'd wandered off without permission. They asked me if I had swayed Evelyn's decision on the will. No, I said. I wasn't even in the room when she signed it. When they suggested Zoe made the whole thing up for attention, I turned to the judge and asked to read aloud Zoe's hospital blood test report. The one showing acute dehydration, sun exposure, and irregular heartbeat from heat exhaustion. The judge allowed it. When I finished reading, I looked directly at Penelope. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then Evelyn took the stand. She didn't stay long. She didn't need to. I've been alive for 93 years, she said. I know the difference between a lie and a tragedy. This was no accident. They didn't try to protect my family. They tried to eliminate part of it. Her voice didn't shake once. After closing arguments, the jury took less than 2 hours. We were called back in just before sunset. The courtroom lights flickered on and the judge returned paper in hand. She addressed the defendants by name. Penelope Carter. 9 years imprisonment. No parole eligibility for the first 5. Penelope gasped. The sound of her chair squeaking as she collapsed back into it echoed like a firework in a quiet room. Harper Blake. Thomas Blake. 6 years each. My mother's mouth opened slightly. My father bowed his head. The judge continued, her voice clear. This court finds that this was not a case of passive neglect. It was a coordinated act of abandonment with financial motive. If not for the victim's resilience and her mother's swift action, this would have been a homicide case. Then she looked at me. Ms. Blake, your actions saved your daughter's life. Let that be part of the official record. I nodded, but said nothing. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp. Zoe stood beside me, a little pale, but with a steadiness that made her seem older than 17. She didn't say anything at first, just looked out at the horizon. Then she took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "It's over." I squeezed her hand. Some victories are loud. This one. It was quiet, but permanent. After the trial, the silence came quickly. It didn't sneak in like fog or whisper its way into our routines. It slammed the door shut and stayed there. No calls, no texts, no half-hearted hope you're okay messages, just silence. The family group chat was the first thing to disappear. I opened my phone one morning and saw it was gone. Not archived, not renamed, just erased. No warning, no explanation, as if it had never existed. One day there were photos of birthdays and holiday dinners and filtered smiles, and the next there was nothing. I didn't mourn it. Some things vanish because they're finished. Others disappear because someone knows they no longer have the right to stay. Zoe never mentioned the chat. I think she knew it was gone before I did. She moved through those first few weeks post-trial with the quiet efficiency of someone who had survived something no one else in her school could quite understand. She still went to class, still aced her tests, but she no longer tolerated small talk or shallow apologies. She'd learned how to read people in the desert, and some of them had never left it. One afternoon, while I was unpacking groceries, she walked into the kitchen holding an envelope. It had her name written in Penelope's handwriting, the same slanted cursive she used on Christmas cards and birthday envelopes for years. No return address, just Zoe, plain and centered. I froze watching her from across the counter. I didn't speak. I wanted to see what she'd do without anyone telling her what she should feel. She stood there for a moment, then pulled the tab and slid out a single sheet of paper. She read it once. Her face didn't change. Then she read it again, this time slower. When she was finished, she folded it carefully, walked to the home office, and fed it into the shredder. The machine whirred, the blades turned, and Penelope's apology disappeared in strips of quiet finality. Zoe came back into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured herself a glass of orange juice like nothing had happened. I didn't ask what the letter said. If it had mattered, she would have kept it. Instead, she chose erasure. Later that night, I opened the trash bin and saw the envelope torn in half. I picked up one piece. It had the closing line still visible. "Please don't ruin the whole family over this." As if Zoe had done the ruining. As if telling the truth about being left to die in the desert was somehow worse than leaving someone there in the first place. I threw the paper away. Some days later, I heard from Evelyn. She called me from the landline in her garden study, the one she only used for conversations she considered worth having. She didn't ask how Zoe was doing. She already knew. Benson had kept her updated. She didn't mention Harper or Thomas either. She got straight to the point. "Your mother came to see me," she said. I said nothing. She wanted to explain. To apologize, I suppose. Or at least to soften the edges. "Did you let her?" Evelyn exhaled slowly. I listened. Then I told her the truth. I waited. I told her Zoe is the only one in this family who carries my blood in a way that matters. Her voice didn't shake. Mine almost did. She said that wasn't fair. Evelyn continued, that I was erasing decades of loyalty and effort. I could practically hear her raising that one eyebrow of hers through the phone. Loyalty, she scoffed. Loyalty doesn't mean much when it disappears in the heat. I pictured Harper standing in Evelyn's living room trying to find the right combination of words to avoid responsibility while still demanding forgiveness. I imagined the way Evelyn probably sat there, calm, calculating, unmoved. "She won't be back," Evelyn said. "She shouldn't be," I replied. After we hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time. Zoe joined me, wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of peppermint tea. The wind was soft, and the trees shifted like they were exhaling. "Did Grandma Evelyn really cut them all off?" Zoe asked after a while. "She did. Even Mom." "Your mom?" I nodded. Zoe looked ahead, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. I didn't think she would. "She saw who stood by her," I said, "and who tried to use her." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "I don't feel guilty," she said like it surprised her. "You don't have to. I thought I would. Like maybe I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin anything, Zoe," I said. "You exposed it." She smiled, then just a little. "The truth is I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been. Anger is heavy. It burns fast and leaves you tired. What I felt now was colder, quieter, a line drawn in permanent ink. The family I was born into was gone. What remained were ashes and the people who had earned the right to still be standing with me." Evelyn sent a handwritten note a few days later. Zoe opened it in the hallway and read it aloud. "I'm proud of you. Let others try to rewrite the story. You just keep living the real one." Zoe pinned it to the corkboard above her desk. The next time she spoke to Evelyn, they made plans for a quiet weekend. Just the two of them. Tea puzzles, long walks in the garden. No talk of trials or trauma or desert sun. Just presence. The healing hadn't finished, but the damage had stopped spreading. There were no more birthday invitations, no holiday cards, no Facebook tags. Penelope's name faded from contact lists. Harper and Thomas disappeared from conversation altogether, and none of it felt like a loss. Because the truth had already replaced them. The truth that some people share your blood and still betray you. That love is not proven by proximity. That survival sometimes means subtraction. And Zoe, my daughter, my storm survivor, my truth teller, was finally free to rebuild without the weight of pretending she ever owed that kind of family anything at all. Zoe asked to start therapy on a Tuesday morning. No prompting, no pressure. She walked into the kitchen while I was rinsing coffee mugs and said, "Do you still have the number you mentioned?" I turned off the faucet, dried my hands and nodded. "I do. Can we call today?" It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't heavy. Just a choice. Hers. We booked the first session for the following week. The therapist's office was small and full of light. Neutral tones, a comfy chair in the corner framed art that wasn't trying too hard to be soothing. The kind of space where silence wasn't awkward. It was allowed. I sat in the waiting room for the first appointment, watching the second hand on the clock sweep around like it had somewhere important to be. Zoe didn't say much when she came out afterward. She just shrugged and said, "I think I'll go back." So we went back. Week after week she kept showing up. Sometimes she came out lighter, sometimes quieter. But there was movement. Gentle, steady. I didn't ask for details. That was her space. What mattered was she'd chosen to take up room in it. Little things started shifting at home. She laughed at a video one night, a real laugh, full-bodied and unfiltered. I was in the next room and paused what I was doing just to listen to it. It had been months since I'd heard that sound. It felt like sunlight warming a house that had been too cold for too long. Another night I noticed her bedroom door was left open while she slept. Just a crack, but it hadn't happened in ages. She used to lock it religiously even before the desert. I didn't say anything. Just gently pulled the hallway nightlight back into its socket and left the door how I found it. She left coffee mugs on the kitchen counter again, forgot her earbuds in the car, left her backpack by the stairs, signs that she felt safe enough to be careless. And I loved every misplaced thing for what it meant. When Thanksgiving came around, there were no invites, no expectations, no guilt-laden texts about gathering for the sake of appearances, just silence. And for the first time, it felt like a gift. "What do you want to do?" I asked Zoe a few days before. She didn't even look up from her cereal. "Hike?" I smiled. "Let's overpack." And we did. We packed like people who'd been burned before. 3 times the water we needed, double the chargers, extra sunscreen, protein bars, headlamps, a whistle. Zoe clipped to her belt and blew every 20 minutes just to annoy me. "I'm establishing dominance over nature," she joked as we climbed a switchback. I rolled my eyes. "You're going to startle a coyote." "Good," she said. "Let it know I bite back." We reached the summit by noon. Sat on a flat rock with peanut butter sandwiches and warm Gatorade legs stretched out under an endless blue sky. Zoe took a selfie of us, unfiltered, sunburnt, and grinning. "I'm going to print this one," she said. "Frame it. Title it, 'Escaped the Bloodline.'" We laughed until our stomachs hurt. That night back home, I got a message from Julian. "Hope the hike went well. Been thinking of you two." I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "It did. Thanks again. For everything. We wouldn't have made it without you." His reply came a minute later. "You would have. I just drove the Jeep." I smiled and put my phone down. Zoe came into the living room a few minutes later and dropped onto the couch beside me with a heavy sigh. "Do you think Evelyn's going to call and ask if I want to help decorate her Christmas tree again?" "She might," I said. "She always starts early." Zoe leaned her head against my shoulder. "Good. I like her weird ceramic angels." "Me too," I said softly. We sat like that for a while, no TV, no music, just quiet and the slow breathing of 2 people who had been through something sharp and dangerous and made it out on the other side. Zoe had stopped carrying the weight of what happened like it was hers to explain. She didn't justify it. She didn't soften it. She let it sit in her past, not her pocket. Healing hadn't erased the cracks, but it had taught her how to live with light shining through them. Sometimes we talked about going back to Arizona. Not for any dramatic reason. Just because it was unfinished business. The trail we never completed, the sunset we didn't see. Not as survivors this time, just as hikers. And when we did go back, it wouldn't be with fear. It would be with full canteens, loud voices, and the knowledge that people who try to break you don't get to define you. Zoe's still Zoe, still quiet in crowds, still picky about music, still able to out-argue anyone on constitutional law. But she smiles more now. Not the polite kind, the real kind. She still flinches at sudden silence, still double-checks her bag before she leaves the house, but she doesn't let fear run her life, and neither do I. We rebuilt something. Maybe not a perfect family, maybe not what we once believed we had, but something strong, something chosen. Zoe once told me, "Some things survive the fire, not in spite of it. Because of it." She's one of those things, and I get to be the witness to that survival every single day. 9 months later, we returned to Arizona, not because we had to, not because anyone asked us to. We came back because the story deserved to end where it almost didn't, where it almost took everything. The courtroom had long since emptied. The headlines faded. The family name once whispered through community gossip and polite circles had become something no one wanted to mention anymore. Not out of shame, but because there was simply nothing left to say. The sentencing had been final. Penelope serving 9 years with no possibility of parole for the first 5. My mother and father, Harper and Thomas, each sentenced to 6. They had stood behind their lawyers with expressionless faces, flinching only slightly when the words attempted manslaughter were spoken aloud. They never looked at me. They never looked at Zoe. And I didn't need them to. They had built their walls. We had burned them down. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And now we were free. Zoe and I stood again in the Arizona heat, this time prepared. Wide-brimmed hats, layered sunscreen, 3 liters of water each. Snacks tucked inside pockets, 2 backup chargers, and the same hiking boots we wore the day we found each other again. Julian had sent us the updated trail map just in case. He didn't join us this time. He didn't need to. We didn't come here for rescue. We came for remembrance. The same ridge loomed in the distance. It looked different now. Smaller. Less threatening. It hadn't changed. As we started hiking, Zoe blew the whistle that hung around her neck, twice loudly. Then she grinned. "That's for the ghosts," she said. "Let 'em know we're back," I replied. We laughed and kept walking. The sun was high but not oppressive. The wind rolled in steady breaths. We passed the spot where Julian and I had first seen Zoe's scarf, and she pointed at the rock it had been tied to. "You know," she said, "I was so sure I wasn't going to make it. But I also knew somehow that you'd come." I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened just slightly. "I would have torn that whole desert apart to find you," I finally said. She nodded. "I know." We stopped halfway up the ridge and sat on a flat boulder, sipping water and watching the clouds drift slowly overhead. The trail behind us was clear, the path forward familiar. Zoe took out her phone and snapped a few pictures. Not for social media. Not to prove anything. Just to keep. "This is ours now," she said. I smiled. It always was. After our break, we climbed higher, nearing the outcrop where I had found her nearly a year ago. She didn't slow down. If anything, she led the way. Her steps were sure, balanced. And when we reached the top, she turned, stood tall on the edge of the ridge, and blew the whistle again, this time once long and loud. It echoed through the canyons. She turned toward me, cheeks pink from the sun eyes, sharp and alive. I wanted them to hear that. "Wherever they are," she said, "I hope they do." I said, "But even if they don't, you know who you are now. That's louder than anything." We stood there for a long time, not speaking, not needing to, just breathing the air, letting it all settle. And I thought back. Through the silence, the courtroom, the hospital, the betrayal, through the heat and the dust and the lies, through every moment that told me to scream and every instinct that told me to stay still, I didn't scream. I gathered proof. I moved with purpose, not fury. Because some justice doesn't come in the form of vengeance. Some justice comes in the quiet, steady act of telling the truth, over and over, until there's no version of the story left except the real one. Zoe sat down beside me and picked up a stone. She held it in her palm, studied it, then placed it gently back on the ledge. "That's enough for today," she said. We made our way down the trail behind us, carrying nothing but our footprints. At the car, she turned to me with one last grin. "I'm hungry. You owe me pancakes. Only if you let me have extra syrup," I said. She smirked. "We'll see." Back home, she printed one of the photos from the hike. It showed her at the top of the ridge arms, outstretched wind in her hair, the world wide open behind her. She pinned it on her wall beneath a small handwritten quote she'd written in blue ink. "I am not what they tried to erase. I am what survived it." We never went back to the old family traditions. No more holidays with strained smiles. No more invites to brunches filled with tension disguised as politeness. Evelyn came over often. She brought chessboards and lemon bars and stories from her younger years that Zoe actually enjoyed. Julian stopped by every few months when work brought him nearby. He and Zoe had a running joke about who was more prepared now. He hadn't won yet. And me, I stopped trying to fix what wasn't mine to heal. Instead, I focused on what was in front of me. A daughter who had fought to live. A life that had reshaped itself in fire. A future that didn't ask for silence, only honesty. So now if you're listening, really listening, I'll ask you something. Do you think I went too far? or not nearly far enough? Let me know, because sometimes justice gets served quietly, and sometimes it roars back in the voice of a girl who survived a desert and never looked back. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, made you reflect, or made you think about what you would do to protect the ones you love, then you're not alone. Have you ever been in a situation where speaking up meant risking everything, but staying silent meant losing yourself? We want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. And if stories like this resonate with you, stories of truth, family, betrayal, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Because sometimes the quietest voices tell the loudest truths.